Hello, and welcome to the first ever YouTube edition of Caught Up in Char's Web. If you are new here, my name is Charlotte, and I write a newsletter called Caught Up in Char's Web. I started writing this newsletter a couple of years ago, and when I first did it, my brother texted me saying,
I journal too, Charlotte. I just don't send it out as an email blast.
and he was completely joking at the time. This is a quintessential younger brother comment, but what that was pointing to was how unusual it was to be sharing myself so vulnerably with friends, family, and strangers on the internet. And after 2 years of doing this, I've been really thinking a lot about what happens when you share yourself vulnerably online. So this is a newsletter in which I'm reflecting on just that. If that interests you, stick around for more. But first, let me take a sip of my matcha. I don't think there's anything greater in life than an after lunch hot matcha. Okay, let's get into it. It was a hot summer day in the middle of the pandemic. I pulled out my laptop and rolled out my mat to do yet another 30-minute YouTube workout by myself. And that's when a video titled All In by Stephanie Buttermore popped up. I didn't know who she was at the time, but something about the thumbnail and the title of the video prompted me to watch. Little did I know, this video by a stranger would change my life. All In was a challenge that Stephanie was doing in which she committed to gaining as much weight as necessary in order to get her period back. And it had been 2 years since I had had a period at the time, and I knew I needed to do this too. For God knows what in the simulation reason, this video found me at the exact moment that I was ready to listen. Gaining an undefined amount of weight was probably my biggest fear at the time, but through the vulnerability that Stephanie shared, I felt connected enough to this random woman on the internet that I was able to commit to undertake one of the most challenging things I had ever done. I joined a Facebook group of other women doing this at the same time. I bought books about hypothalamic amenorrhea and read them all. I learned about the female athlete triad, which is undereat, overexercise, too much stress, and I decided that I myself was going all in. The reason I'm sharing this personal information with many strangers, family, and friends on the internet is because it's helping me to answer one of the biggest questions that I've been asking myself lately, which is what happens when we share our vulnerabilities online? Let's start from the beginning. I was in 5th grade when I made my Facebook account. I asked my mom for permission to get a Facebook and she said yes with the ultimatum of,
If you go get me a cloth napkin from the cabinet to put this warm bread in.
I complied and my Facebook was created, and I have been online ever since. But my socials were a way to keep in touch with friends, read, a way of getting validation from other teenagers and depleting my dopamine stores on a daily basis. I used Instagram like many other millennial Gen Z cuspers, that is, to get attention. I had a private account in which I would take bikini pictures at the beach with my friends and occasionally post one, but more often than not delete them all off of my phone after they had completely destroyed my day. Social media was a destructive force for my confidence, which came at the perfect time to accompany me through puberty. This was a time in which skinny me teas were all the rage, in which there were a few girls at my school that were posting what I eat in a days and becoming early fitness influencers, and it was embarrassing at the time, but we all secretly wanted to do the same, and we now worship them all, and several are millionaires. All of this is to say that social media has changed dramatically over the past 15 years, and it is only now really that I'm taking a good hard look at how I use it and the purpose that it serves in my life. I've gone through phases of deleting it altogether. When I did my yoga teacher training, I tried posting from a more spiritual perspective and found myself feeling incredibly embarrassed. I've been public, private, and back and forth a bunch of times, but through these extremes, I never really took a look at the difference between the way that I was consuming versus creating, and it caused a lot of unaddressed cognitive dissonance. I consumed a lot of other people's self-expression and benefited from it greatly, but I was still creating from a place of vanity rather than self-acceptance, which led me to the question of, what happens when you share yourself vulnerably online? So let's address the fears first. My biggest fear for posting online has always been embarrassing myself. I've always felt like social media captions and posting in general favors the cool girl. The game to be played is one of remaining aloof, saying just enough to intrigue people, but not enough to give yourself away. You want to come across as mysterious and desirable, and part of that game requires holding your cards close to your chest. The fear that this has instilled is being perceived as embarrassing for expressing vulnerably amongst a group of people who are doing the exact opposite. It's like the girl from Mean Girls who just wants to bake a cake made out of sprinkles and rainbows. Sometimes I feel like that is how I will be perceived for posting online. And beyond the fear of embarrassing myself for being being more vulnerable online than those around me is a fear of genuinely oversharing, of putting myself in danger for sharing too much online, or later looking back at something I said and feeling remorse for making myself too available on the internet. The truth of the matter when it comes to embarrassing ourselves is that, sure, some people may judge you. The roster of high school boys that come to mind when thinking of posting something a bit more out there honestly doesn't matter. Their goldfish attention spans are too short to care anyways. If they throw you in a group chat and are making fun of you, but you are learning to overcome the patterns that have kept you small your whole life, so fucking be it. The latter part, though, is important to address. While I cannot say how my 45-year-old self will feel about 26-year-old me spilling vulnerabilities on the internet, I do have the discernment already to be able to know when I'm posting something for attention versus posting something because I sincerely believe that it will be helpful to others who have also felt alone. In other words, the biggest differentiating factor between whether you will likely regret a post or not is the intention with which you post it. If you are sharing your vulnerabilities to get attention, you probably will not feel that great about it later on. That's where we start to feel exploited and lines should be drawn. But if you are sincerely sharing from a place of wanting your life experience to accompany others who may feel less alone in theirs, I really don't think your future self will regret that. And I can't say how you will feel with certainty because I'm not you, nor am I your future self. But if I look back on all the things that I've done out of the sincerity of my heart and commitment to my values, I really don't regret them. I can learn from them for sure and change my style and means of expression as I learn, grow, and mature, but I tend not to regret the things that younger me has done from a commitment to finding and sharing my own truth. Another fear of posting online is related to pedestalization. Both being on the pedestal and looking up to the person that you've placed on the pedestal are dangerous positions. When you're on the pedestal, the danger is related to falling off, getting canceled, sharing something that turns other people away, being perceived as an authority in ways that you do not believe in or never asked to be put in. When you are below the pedestal, looking up to somebody who you put on there, the danger is relying too heavily on someone else's voice instead of learning to hear and follow your own. In normal social relationships, there's reciprocity at play. I share something vulnerable with you, and you share something back. We build trust over time, and we both have skin in the game. You know things about me, and I trust you to hold, and I know things about you that you trust me to hold. That balances out the scale. We've got each other's backs, and in a parasocial relationship, however, the reciprocity falls by the wayside. You know things about me, and I know nothing about you, and therefore if I say something that you don't agree with, you have little to lose by chucking me by the wayside. I'm just some random girl writing a newsletter and posting a video of it on YouTube. Next. I'm using myself as an example here, but I'm totally guilty of doing this with people that I follow too. There have been countless times where someone I'm obsessed with and follow religiously says something that I moderately disagree with, and I internally cancel them. My perception is soured and I move on. In a normal friendship, this would not happen so fast. I would be more forgiving of our differences in opinion, and there would be more wiggle room to learn from each other's differences. And this is why the internet is such an echo chamber, because as soon as someone expresses a subtle difference in opinion from us, we unfollow and move on to the next. We can't do that as easily in real life, and that is one of the dangers of sharing vulnerably online. This will happen. There will be people that are turned off by something that you say, and you will lose their respect. But such is life and the nature of the game. I also hope that over time, people become more aware of this tendency and aren't so quick to throw people away for slight differences in opinion. Of course, there are cases in which people certainly should be canceled, and the accountability of that online is a good thing. But writ large, I think we've overdone it, and the force behind this is parasociality and not having skin in the game in our relationships. They are unidirectional, and it's made it easier to fall from the pedestal than it is to get placed on there. I love how Elizabeth Gilbert handles this. Gilbert wrote Eat, Pray, Love to share her story and vulnerabilities with other women who had gone through similar journeys of settling for the wrong qualities in partnership and purpose early on and embark on a journey to find themselves after. At the time, this was pretty revolutionary. Women were not solo traveling around the world and having these types of experiences. She really paved the way for a lot of female empowerment, and I myself have benefited from Eat, Pray, Love being part of our rhetoric. Gilbert tells a story of being stopped at customs and being asked what she does for work. I'm a writer, she says, and then is asked what she's written. I'm best known for my book, Eat, Pray, Love. The TSA agent's eyes widen and she calls over her colleagues. "This is Eat, Pray, Love," she exclaims. The agent then says to Liz, "You wouldn't believe how many women come through customs every single day and say that the purpose of their travels was eat, pray, loving." I share that to indicate the level of impact that this book has had on our culture, whether you like it or not. But Gilbert didn't expect it to soar like it did. This book has sold over, I believe, 12 million copies and made it into many of the wrong hands. This book was not meant for certain people to read. Its reach extended far beyond its intended audience, which led Gilbert to fall from her pedestal after her initial leap to success. Eat, Pray, Love was revered and then gawked at. It's now found its way back to a second wave of success as being kind of camp. Her confidence through it all, though, was totally admirable, and I love this example of the power of putting yourself out there. I found myself wondering how Liz Gilbert was able to maintain her sense of self when Eat, Pray, Love was on blast. While someday I hope to get to ask her that directly, here is my current hypothesis based on my own experiences and ideas. The reason I think Liz Gilbert was so resilient in handling so much negative attention from her book after it soared to such heights is because she did not get her validation from other people's perceptions of her work. She found her worth in the process of creation itself. She was at a point where she was able to stay anchored in how beneficial her message had been to those that it was for, which made weathering the storm of reaching those that it was not far more tolerable. And there's a bigger lesson at play here, one that actually relates to my eating disorder back at the top of this. That is, redefining the sources from which we seek fulfillment. One of the things that helped me most in healing from disordered eating was doubling down on other things that brought me joy. Instead of keeping all of the eggs in the basket of how my ass looked in size 24 jeans, I began leaning into the things that gave me real dopamine, like writing, painting, making friends with people that shared in my values, hosting dinners, starting an event series in New York around reading, creating a deck of playing cards and conversation starters, and so much more. What this did for me was right-size the amount of time I was spending thinking about my body, food, and exercise. At their core, eating disorders and other forms of perfectionism stem from a desire for control and a perverted relationship to validation and attention. We create these overly simplified systems in our head that help us understand if we are on track or not, and social media can be used for the same thing. Calorie counting in an eating disorder can be akin to likes, comments, and stats on socials. So if the pathway out of an eating disorder was to find other sources of fulfillment, the key to avoiding the pitfalls of social media comparison is to ensure that it does not become a means for seeking validation. And how do we do that, one might ask? By enjoying the process of creation itself and using socials as a tool for self-expression instead of a chamber for self-obsession. When we create from a place of joy rather than a sense of duty, obligation, and keeping up with the Joneses, it's a lot easier to keep these things working for you instead of the other way around. Which leads me finally to the benefits of sharing online. When people share their struggles on the internet, others are able to see themselves in strangers and feel less alone. As previously mentioned, there were troves of women that I followed who helped me greatly in feeling less alone while my body changed and I overcame my eating disorder. To name a few, Kate Noel, Millie Goldsmith, Natasha Ocean, Spencer Barbosa, Celeste Barber, Florence Given, the list goes on. There's something about the anonymity of a stranger sharing their story that makes it so much more relatable. I had many friends, a mother and sister, that all could relate to body struggles, but something about being able to find strangers online that knew nothing about me and therefore were not coming in with a bias was incredibly helpful for making me feel seen, connected, and capable of making real, tangible progress. If they could do it, I could too. I wrote last week about the benefits of asking better questions and holding yourself accountable to writing out their answers. And one of the main benefits that I mentioned was the relationships that you develop with other writers, thinkers, creators through the process of exploring your own curiosities. In order for you to have access to those people, they have to share their works, not necessarily online, but in some way, shape, or form. And while the virality of social media and quickness of it all feels new, parasocial relationships are not. Liz Gilbert calls Mary Oliver her best friend that she has never met and likely never knew of her. And by that, Gilbert means that she reveres Oliver's work and perspectives on the world, which she was only able to find through her books and materials about Oliver's life that are publicly available. In order for us all to benefit from being able to put ourselves in conversation with others, those others have to share themselves. If they had withheld their stories, vulnerabilities, and art, we would be lesser in our own expressions and remixes of the works around us. One important thing to call out here, though, is that there are many different forms of sharing our works and expressing ourselves. Social media is not for everyone, nor should it be. This brings me back to the point about being discerning as to why you are sharing. And I think form, or rather platform, plays a big role here. There are many different platforms for us to share in this day and age. Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Substack, YouTube, personal websites, podcasts, self-published books, the list goes on. And the reason I think that medium matters is because we all have preferred mechanisms for self-expression. I've always preferred writing out long-winded answers to questions, shocking, I know, and I find it hard to capture what I'm trying to say in short-form clips, and more importantly, the feeling that I have in creating them just pales in comparison to writing. So for me, I love to write, and I want to explore the platforms that allow me to sit my ass down and enjoy the process of what I'm doing here. As a result, that is where I give most of my attention, and there is part of me that is also deeply curious about short form and upgrading my relationship with social media, in particular, from starting out as a bikini posting, validation seeking tween into the self-expressive, no fucks given woman that I'm becoming today. So I will continue to experiment with short form in hopes of sharing messages that find others that may feel the same, and even more importantly, in pursuit of answering the questions that I'm most curious about. But the intention there remains. If there is ever a time in which I feel myself wanting to hit post in order to get attention, I will refrain and do something else with that thought instead. And I will keep my focus on making heavy things instead of getting swept away in the creation of too much noise. So, in answer to my initial question of what happens when we share ourselves vulnerably online. 1. We connect with others who have shared similar experiences and feel less alone. 2. We develop our confidence and refine our curiosities by holding ourselves accountable to answering our own questions and sharing what we find. 3. We put ourselves in conversation with others who are asking similar questions and create a core sense of intellectual community, which is one of the most rewarding parts of life. 4. We get the fuck over the fear of embarrassing ourselves by realizing that no one gives a rat's ass what you're doing. Their attention spans are too short anyways, and those with whom you do resonate are so worth it for sharing in the end. And 5, through the confidence that we develop in self-expression, we are able to move away from making content and towards making art. The difference there is that art moves us to tears. It helps us feel connected to parts of ourselves that we couldn't otherwise access. It makes us better than we were before. Content, on the other hand, zaps us of our dopamine and steals our joy. So in conclusion, yes, I am keenly aware of the dangers of sharing yourself vulnerably online, but I am more acutely interested in the benefits that come from self-expression. And I will end on this note. Not everything that you do, and not everything that you think or believe needs to be shared online. Do not share with urgency. Do not make content. Make art. And I don't mean that to be pretentious either. Make bad art too. For the love of God, the last thing we need is more perfectionism. I just mean that the difference between art and content is that art is made for creative liberation and content is created for validation. Share the things that feel fucking good to get off your chest, and then don't be afraid to keep some small parts in the crook of your elbow, as Maya Angelou says. So share what frees you, keep what protects you, make it honest. Make it weird, make it yours. And above all, create like no one's watching, because most of them aren't, but the few who are, they might need your message more than you know. And when you're done, log off, take a walk, delete the apps off your phone, and go do something that does not need a caption. That's all for today. Thank you for getting caught up in Char's web with me. I will catch you here soon.